We'll start with Jennifer's question. Even though Don has graciously muted all of you, this is also something that can be a discussion, okay, if you do have something to say. We, we find here and there, okay, the idea of things in the Torah which are supposed to be hushed up, okay, which are not supposed to be taught in public, which are perhaps not to be read in public or not translated in public. And in that place, it's actually a passage in the Mishnah, the rabbis also talk about certain topics, okay, that are not meant to be made privy to large numbers of people. The topics that they mention are called Ma'aseh Bereshit, the account of the beginning, perhaps the secrets of the creation of the world or the secrets of the physical universe. And then you have Ma'aseh Merkavah. You have the account of the chariot, the first chapter of, which is apparently intended to reflect some kind of wisdom about upper worlds, divine worlds, the heavenly court, things like that. These are not to be taught to large numbers of people, not to more than two, or maybe only to one, and maybe even to one, not explicitly. Okay, so you have this idea of a secret Torah. Usually we talk about classical Judaism as being the Judaism of the dual Torah, the double Torah, the written Torah and the oral Torah. This is familiar to all of you. But when you bring in this element of secrecy, what you're really saying is that there's three Torahs. There's the written Torah, which is public. There's the normal oral Torah, which is also public. And then you have the secret oral Torah, the secret oral tradition. And that tradition is something that very few people are meant to be privy to. Okay, so this idea of a secret Torah, of sitrei Torah, the secrets of the Torah, it exists from rabbinic times. And there are certain writings which may date way back or maybe more medieval, which touch upon perhaps some of these ideas, the account of creation or the account of the chariot, okay? These are things which are normally considered to be pre-Kabbalah, okay? They're like the steps before we get to the full-fledged mysticism of the Middle Ages, the Zohar, and what came after, okay? Now, what Jennifer asked is simply comes from that, okay? If you have a secret Torah, if you have a Torah which is not meant to be available, then you need limitations on its study. The limitations that are talked about in the Mishnah are very simple. You don't need age limits. You don't need a drinking age that gets raised from 18 to 19 to 20 to 21. But Kabbalah, it's 40. You don't need that because a drinking age is for everybody, right? And the way the rabbis describe it, the one person who's privy to this wisdom only teaches it to one or perhaps two people. I think it's one, okay? And you don't teach Maaseh Bereshit to two, and you don't teach Maaseh Merkavah even to one in a straight fashion. So if it's only going to be handed over one to one, and most people are never even going to hear about it, then you don't need a drinking age and you don't need a Kabbalah age limit. In the spread, and it becomes a text. Being a text does not mean that it's available to everyone, because there's plenty of people who can look at a text like this and can't figure out anything. Okay, it still may need to be taught. And but it's much more accessible, it's much more available if it's in the form of the Middle Ages, a written book like the Zohar. And that's where you start hearing about other methods of limiting it, of keeping it secret, because it's in its very nature, it's a secret Torah. And the way that that's done is to say things like, you can't study it under the age of 40, or you can't teach it in public, or when you write about it, you have to write about it using hidden codes and secret words and words that allude to things. That's what the Ramban Nachmanides did in his Torah commentary. Whenever which is a Kabbalistic interpretation, he says this is its sod, this is its secret, and then he spells it out in words that are impossible to understand for a normal person who doesn't have the key to open up the secret. So that's
Rabbi, are you supposed to be, as well as 40, you're supposed to be a married man, only married man are allowed to study it.
There's things like that too, okay? But all of these things are just ways to try to keep it secret. It rests upon a couple of assumptions. Assumption number one is there is a secret Torah. Well, maybe there's not. Assumption number two is that the secret Torah has reached us in this day and age, whether our day and age is the 13th century or the 21st century. Maybe it didn't reach us. Maybe it was just lost. That's what the Rambam Maimonides claimed. Okay? And even if it does reach us, okay, it needs to be in a more accessible form in order to need things like Brian just said or Jennifer said before. Okay, you don't need to say married or age 40 if it's only one teacher teaching it to one student in a generation. He picks the student. He knows whether the student is ready. You don't need an overall drinking age for Kabbalah. You can get drunk on Kabbalah just like on alcohol. Okay, we're going to actually see that tonight big time when we do the Jewish soul and the non-Jewish soul in the Tanya. Now, the one further thing that needs to be pointed out in order to really understand where the Tanya is coming from is that whenever you have a secret and you really are convinced that it's a secret, and you really are convinced that it's been kept hidden for, even when you have all of that, by its very nature, a secret is something that people have a desire to reveal. If you're privy to it, you want other people to know. And if you're not privy to it, you want to become privy to it. That's the nature of a secret, right? All of us in our lives have had secrets, and we all know that by the time you start telling somebody, forget it. I said that wrong, okay? It's not by the time you start telling somebody, it's forget it. By the time you even tell somebody that you have a secret, even if you don't tell them what the secret is, right? The secret is already gone. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't stop it. It will be revealed. That was the case in the Middle Ages. They said we have a secret. They said that not everyone should be privy to it. But just to say that, immediately caused people in every single generation since the era of the Zohar to try to find excuses why the secrets should be revealed, okay? For instance, the Zohar itself. Why should the Zohar be written down if this was an oral tradition, if this was the secret oral Torah for so many generations? Why all of a sudden should it be written down? The answer needed to be that we are now in an age where these things need to be more widespread. It was right to hide it to hide it to a larger degree before. Now it has to become somewhat less hidden, somewhat less accessible, because this generation needs it. Maybe this generation is right on the cusp of the redemption. Maybe the secret Torah needs to be revealed more and more. Generation ever since the Kabbalah became. On the one hand, people saying, no, you need to be 40, you need to be married, you need to know the whole Torah first, all kinds of conditions. That's to limit. And at the
and
very
you need to be male.
You need to be male for sure.
You haven't said anything about that.
Until the age of Madonna, you needed to be male. Okay, that, by the way, is not just true of secret Torah study. It's also true of the open Torah study.
All Torah study, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when the movement began, by the way, for women to study Torah in the early 20th century, Sarah Shneur and the Beit Yaakov movement, okay, that notice was done for certain parts of the open Torah, okay, not even for the whole open Torah, but the Chafetz Chaim who supported that thing, never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that there would be a women's celebration of the Daf Yomi. That was a couple of months ago, right? And he certainly never would have imagined that there would be female scholars of the Zohar or of Kabbalah or of something like that. So you need to have all kinds of conditions in order to be privy. On the one hand, it needs to be limited. But there's always this tension between limiting and revealing. If you have a secret, you have to limit it. But you also have this desire in your guts to reveal it. And there's people who want to know. So this tension in every single generation led to excuses for revealing the secrets of the Torah more and more, okay? All of this, of course, is based on the assumption that what is called the Kabbalah really is the secret Torah. There were plenty of people in the Middle Ages when this whole business started who denied that. They said, this isn't the secret Torah. This is stuff that you're making up. Okay, it's not a tradition. It's not a secret Torah passed down from Moses at Sinai. But assuming it is the secret Torah, and assuming that it is meant to be kept secret or limited in its availability, you needed excuses each time to reveal it more and more. Why is that so important for us tonight, and why is it so good that Jennifer asked it? Because we're starting to do the Tanya. We began chapter 1, excuse me, last week. Excuse me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nihya b'dvaro. You all answered amen on mute. That bracha is the open oral Torah. It's okay. Doesn't have to be kept secret. To get back to the topic, we're beginning to study the Tanya. The Tanya, you remember, is from towards the beginning of the age of Chassidut. The Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, is a student of the Maggid of Mezrich, who is a student of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidut. We're still in the first few generations, the founding generations of Chassidut. Chassidut is no exception to what I just said before. Chassidut is in its very inner essence based upon Kabbalah. It draws from Kabbalah, it builds upon Kabbalah, it interprets Kabbalah, and most important, it makes Kabbalah form to the Jewish masses. That's the main characteristic of Hasidic thought. It's Kabbalah for the masses. It's Kabbalah in a form that anybody, even uneducated people, can find meaningful. Okay? So the Kabbalah fits into, Chassidut fits into exactly what Jennifer asked at the beginning. The claim of the early Hasidim is once again that The Kabbalah needs to be spread. Yafutzu ma'ayonotecha chutza. It has to be revealed in a meaningful form to all, and that it's connected to another basic characteristic of Chassidut. The Chassidut, as a continuation of the Kabbalah, citation of the Kabbalah. Rather than talking about the structure of various worlds that are above us, how many are there? How do they parallel each other? How do they affect each other? In some ways, it's almost like a geography lesson, okay, on other universes. Instead of that, it brings it home to the human being. Okay, what do Kabbalah? How are the ideas of the Kabbalah reflected in your life? To give a simple example of it, prayer. Okay, Kabbalistic prayer is an extraordinarily complicated thing. Only the most adept Kabbalist can achieve Kabbalistic prayer. Kabbalistic prayer involves every single word and every single letter. When you say it, you keep in mind and you visualize it's doing in various other universes. And unless you've learned what each and every word and letter means, you simply can't do that. So Kabbalistic prayer was something that was only scholars, Kabbalistic scholars, were privy to. The vast majority of people couldn't do it. How do you bring that home to the masses? How do you make that relevant to every single Jew, even to somebody who doesn't know how to read and write? The answer is that you take its essence. The essence of Kabbalistic prayer, the reason you're visualizing all kinds of interactions in other universes, is because you're trying through those visualizations to do something, which is to bring the male and female aspects of the sphirot, of these Kabbalistic worlds or forces, together in harmony and peace and in love. Okay, now, to bring them together is an extraordinary act of engineering for the trained Kabbalist. But if you just bring it down to its essence, when you pray, you're not really praying for yourself. When you pray, you're really praying for the Shekhinah to be united with her lover. If you are suffering and you want to pray, your suffering just reflects her suffering. You're being estranged from your loved ones during a coronavirus, let's say. Okay, it just reflects the Shekhinah's being estranged from her, from the one that she loves. So when you pray, don't pray for yourself, said the Maggid of Mezrich. Rather, pray for the Shekhinah. Okay, and that's something that anybody can understand, even with no education, even with no Kabbalah. So that perhaps is an example of the method that early Chassidut used to spread Kabbalah in a way that would be meaningful to the masses. Now, when we come back to now Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, we have a change in the early Hasidic movement, and the change was one that's regarding scholarship. Okay, many early Hasidic rabbis, I said last week, were not superb scholars. Some of them were scholars much at all. Okay, but the Hasidut that began as the intellectual Hasidim, as the Hasidut for the Torah scholars, if you will, the Lithuanian Hasidim. Okay, Lithuania was the place of the scholars. In Vilna, they rejected Hasidut. It was the stronghold of the Misnagdim. Okay, so Habad in its early days was known as the Lithuanian Hasidut, as the educated, scholarly, Talmudic kind of Hasidut. see it again now, a line-by-line translation. It gives it to you in tidbits, okay, so that you can slowly but surely follow the argument. And even there, it's not so easy. Last year we did Martin Buber's, we did a couple of Hasidic stories, right? Compare Martin Buber's Hasidic stories to the Tanya. Okay, it looks like two different planets. The truth is it's not two different planets. But it feels like two different planets because one is a book written for people who know how to study a page of Talmud. And the other are stories that, you tell to anybody. Okay, even somebody who never opened up a Talmud in his life, right? So this is a book that on the one hand, it seems scholarly, and it is scholarly, but on the other hand, at its core, it is Kabbalistic and Hasidic. In fact, it's the Bible of Habad, and perhaps close to being the best argument made in that generation, okay, for Hasidut against the Mitnagdim. Remember that Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin and the Balatanya, the author of the Tanya, they were Balei Plugda. How do you say that in English? They were contemporaries who saw each other as intellectual challenges. They didn't agree with each other, but they could write to each other and they could challenge each other. They both had the same conceptual universe. Okay. With that, what we're going to do tonight is that we're going to finish the chapter we did and begin the chapter so we can see the business about Jewish souls and non-Jewish souls. We'll relate it to the proto-Kabbalah of Yehuda Levi that we did at the beginning of this course. We'll relate it back to that. And then there's a nice page that has selected quotations from the Tanya in English, which we'll use as points for discussion after we finish the first chapter and a half of the Tanya. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share the text with you. Then I'll start with getting us back into the text, like where exactly did we leave off last week. I'm not going to summarize all the details, but just the main point, so that we can jump back into the text with a sense of security. And we're going to see something tonight that gave me a shock as a kid. Okay, as a kid, I told you last week that I first discovered the Tanya in 9th or 10th grade at a Habad house in Boston. Okay, they had like a place where they rented rooms for Jewish people who wanted to stay in the Boston area for Shabbat. So I opened up instead of the what do you call them? Who are the people who leave Bibles in the drawers in hotels? Forgot.
Gideon.
Yeah, the Gideon Bibles, right? So instead of a Gideon Bible in the Chabad house, you have a Tanya. So as the yeshiva bacher, I opened up the book, and I broke my teeth a little bit looking at the first chapter or so. And I saw there an idea that I never forgot. And it returned later in life. I saw people talking about it, writing about it, but I first discovered it completely by accident. The views of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi about Jewish souls and non-Jewish souls. How does this have anything to do with the text that we began last week? Last week we saw that the book called the Tanya has 3 different names. Okay? It's unofficially called the Tanya because that's its first word. Okay? It was taught. And that's a nice word to start a book off on if you want people to who are seeking to be taught. Secondly, it's called Likutei Amarim. He was very, very modest, and he called his work a a collection of sayings, meaning I'm just eclectic, I just gathered wisdom from others. This is not my wisdom, and I don't claim that it's my wisdom. Okay? The truth is, the way that he uses these sayings is extremely new, including the idea that we're about to see now. And he's being a little bit modest. Yeah, he's being modest, but there really is something new here. It's not just a collection of older sayings. And finally, the book, the official title of the book, the title that really sums up what the book is about, is Sefer HaBenonim, the book of the people in the middle. And last week we had a rather lengthy discussion of the text when it deals with who is righteous, who is considered wicked, who is somewhere in the middle. We talked about the widespread colloquial notion. Someone with more mitzvot is righteous, someone with more sins is wicked, and the Benoni, the scales kind of balance out somewhere in the middle. But the Baal HaTanya says, and I don't know, he at least convinced me, I don't know if it convinced you, that despite that colloquial vision, okay, that's not exactly what the terms mean in their original context, in most original contexts. He takes it to an extreme that I find personally kind of difficult. The extreme he takes it to is this, and we already saw it last week, that someone who commits a sin, even a minor sin, even a rabbinic sin, or even a passive sin, meaning a person who doesn't go out of his or her way to do a mitzvah. Not that you hurt somebody. It's not that you missed a mitzvah. Even one sin like that already makes you called, already has you called a rasha, an evildoer, or a wicked person. Okay? So it's not the balance of the scales, he argues, in what we read last week. Rather, the wicked person is the person who sins. The righteous person is the person who I said it wrong. The wicked person is the person who sins. The middle of the road person is the person who refrains from sinning. Get this. You don't sin. All of your actions are righteous, so you're considered middle of the road. Who in that case is righteous? The person for whom the evil inclination no longer is active. Okay, if there is such a person, that is a wild concept. Even before we get to Jewish and non-Jewish souls, that's already a shocking thing to say, right? First of all, to say that, if you spend your whole life doing mitzvot and you sinned once, you're considered wicked. Second of all, to say that righteous people not only don't sin, but that they have no evil inclination at all. There's passages in the Talmud that contradict that. And Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi is aware of that, of course. There's a famous passage in the Talmud that the greater a person is, the greater that person's evil inclination is. Meaning, greater virtue is not gained through abandoning the evil inclination, but rather through overcoming and restraining or taking charge of the evil inclination. What I just told you now would seem to contradict what Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi said. Solve the problem. Now we'll go back to the text. I believe you can see the text. Okay. When can a person be considered a Benoni? For at the time one sins, even one sin, until he repents, he is deemed to be completely wicked. Can you believe that? And if he was sinful and then repented, thus ceasing to be wicked, he is deemed completely righteous once you do a full repentance. Even he who violates a minor prohibition of the rabbis is termed wicked, as it states in various places. Moreover, even who himself does not sin but has the opportunity to forewarn another against sinning and fails to do so is termed wicked. All the more so he who neglects any positive law, which he is able to fulfill. Okay? For instance, he who is able to study Torah and does not do so, you waste Torah study time. Our sages have said, because they've applied the verse to him, because he has despised the word of the law by wasting time or doing something else instead of studying the Torah, and that person shall be utterly cut off. The punishment is called in Hebrew karet. It is thus plain that such a person is called wicked, more so than he who violates a prohibition of the sages. This being so, we must conclude that the Benoni, the middle of the road person, is not guilty even of the sin of neglecting to study the Torah. And that is why Rabbi, in the story that we saw last week, mistook himself for Benoni. He said even one his eye is a Benoni, a middle of the road person. Okay, we're going to skip to here. Okay, we skipped there's sometimes notes in the middle of the text. As for we did this last week. Also, as for the well-known saying that one whose deeds and misdeeds are equally balanced is called the Benoni, the majority of virtues outweighing this righteous person. Borrowed name, a figurative use of the term, in order to emphasize a particular point when it denotes a balance between merits and sins, when it's talking about the scale on the day of judgment. But in fact, borrowed names used in regard for reward and punishment, because one is judged on the day of judgment according to the majority of his deeds, and he is termed righteous in reference to his verdict, since he is acquitted in his trial if he has a majority of good deeds. If, however, we seek to truly define, not this scales definition, the distinct qualities and ranks of tzaddikim and benonim, to distinguish between the righteous and the middle people, because if the middle of the road people don't sin at all, then what makes them middle of the road? How are they different from the righteous? Our sages have remarked that the righteous are judged, i.e., solely by their good nature, as it is written, "V'libi chalal b'kirbi," my heart is slain within me. How does he use this word, this verse midrashically? Meaning that it's from Psalms, meaning that he, David, the author of this verse from Psalms, was devoid of an evil nature, having slain it through fasting. David was righteous. Now, you may tell me, what? David was righteous? David has several accounts of murder in the book of Samuel and Kings, and rape, and there's quite a few things David did over the course of his lifetime that don't look too good. So how can David be righteous? Well, nobody ever claimed that David didn't sin. I shouldn't say that. There are those who have claimed it, even in the Talmud. But the claim here is not that David didn't sin. The claim here is that David, like his forefather Judah, who also was kind of a rough guy, he sinned, but he repented. We already saw above that once you repent in a true repentance, you are considered righteous. Furthermore, we saw the verse where David says that he has slain his heart within himself, meaning he's killed his evil inclination. David may have been guilty of all kinds of horrible things, but in the view of Rabbi Shneur, Zalman of Liadi, at the end of his life, he repented and he completely slew that evil inclination that had once led him to do the rather severe things that he did.
Shirley. Almighty thought David was unfit to build the temple. So how does the rabbi thinks he knows more than Hashem?
You're saying, how can Rabbi Shneur, Zalman of Liadi, argue with the Tanakh? Or better yet, argue with what God himself says in the Tanakh?
Video.
Right. In that, it's a good question. The first thing that comes to my mind is that verse about David does not blame David for shedding blood in war. Okay? It says that you've shed blood in war, and therefore your hands are not the right ones to build the temple. It will be your son. But it doesn't blame him for fighting the wars, meaning the wars are not necessarily considered evil deeds. Okay, that might be a way to deal with the problem. There's no guilt implied in that verse.
But sending somebody to be killed in said war is another
That's a different story. That was a sin, and he repents. Okay. Okay, but the verse that the Brian talked about was that he was a man of war, that he fought wars, not the specific issue with Uriah and Bathsheba. So look at this claim. Look at this claim. Anyone who is not entirely rid of his or her evil nature is a middle-of-the-road person and not a righteous person. That is quite I don't know what the word is. That is quite a thing to ask of a person in order to call somebody righteous. Right? You're not even asking for perfectly righteous behavior. You're asking for a perfect heart with no evil left in it. This is why our sages have expounded. The Almighty saw that the righteous were few, so he arose and planted. He spread them. He spread them out, the righteous. He plants a few righteous people, or maybe just one, in every single generation. Why is this so important? Why does he have to go in this direction? Because this is towards the beginning of the Hasidic movement. The central figure in Hasidut is the tzaddik, the righteous man, okay? Every Hasid needs to find his tzaddik. The tzaddik, the way that it's being described here, is a completely different kind of person than the Hasid. The Hasid may have no sins, but if the slightest evil remains in the heart of the Hasid is not a tzaddik. How many people in the world can there be like that? How many Dalai Lamas or Gandhis or whatever, okay, can you have in the world? I don't know if it's true, okay, that the Dalai Lama or Gandhi had no evil in their hearts, okay? But how many people can be in the world with no evil in their hearts, if there even indeed exists such a person? Rabbi Shneur, Zalman of Liadi, thinks that such a person does exist, and that there must be at least one who is planted by God in each and every generation. And that is the person whom the Hasid must seek out. Now, for it is written that the Tzaddik is the foundation of the world. Okay, the way you'd understand this in a simple sense is that there's so few Hasidim in the world, tzaddikim in the world, and the world needs a tzaddik. So the tzaddik is the foundation of the world. If you didn't have the tzaddik, the world would collapse. Okay, that's the simplistic way. There's probably a lot more to it, because in the Zohar, okay, you have this verse, tzaddik yisod olam, the tzaddik is the foundation of the world, as referring to the lowest sphira. Excuse me. Wait. Yeah, I believe I am correct, but somebody can check in a chart. Okay, it's a very low sphira. I believe the lowest one. Okay, Yesod, It's the lowest one that's closest to Shekhinah. Okay, and then the next step is our world. That Sphira is called Tzaddik. Tzaddik Yesod Olam. Okay, the world, in other words, derives from this lowest male element of the Sphirot, which, by the way, all presents sexual origin. Okay, the verse is also connected to Joseph, who didn't give in to Potiphar's wife. Okay, that he ruled his desires. Okay, all of that is subsumed in this kind of chivalric idealization in the world of the Sphirot.
Sorry, I've got another Shaila.
What?
What about the Lamed and Vav Tzadikim? We're supposed to be only 36.
Okay, there's supposed to be 36. I don't know. I honestly don't know how that fits into this, but it's also a good question. Okay, now he's going to explain the matter. The explanation of the matter, so that we can understand the difference between a tzaddik and a benoni, excuse me, is to be found Kabbalah for this. In light of what Rabbi Chaim Vital wrote in Sefer HaKdusha and also apparently in Eitz Chaim. Rabbi Chaim Vital was the student of Rabbi Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist of Tzfat, who began a new era in the history of Kabbalah, Lurianic Kabbalah. The Ari did not write. His ideas were committed to writing by his student, Rabbi Chaim Vital. That's why Eitz Chaim is not just a phrase that's often used in synagogues. It's also a phrase that's used in Kabbalistic books. Okay? And Rabbi Chaim Vital writes the following. He writes that every Jew, whether righteous or wicked, possesses two souls. As it is written, look at the Hebrew, unishamot ani asiti. Nishamot. I made souls, souls in the plural, and souls is a minimum of two. Right? So the Midrash learns the minimal possible yitur, the minimal possible inclusion from this. I made souls, I made two souls for each and every Jew. Each of us is walking around with two souls because we're Jewish. Okay? It has to do with being Jewish. Let's go on. If I can get this down. There are two souls, nefashot. One soul, each of these souls has a different origin, a different place of origin. One soul originates in the klipa and in the sitra achra. The klipa means the rind or the peel. I just ate half of a, what do you call those things? An eshkolit. Okay? So you eat the fruit and you throw away the rind. The rind. That's the klipa. The klipa is a very important idea in Lurianic Kabbalah, in the writings of Rabbi Chaim Vital and the ideas of Rabbi Isaac Luria. We actually talked about this just last week. Okay, at least mentioned it. This Lurianic idea that God wanted to love and wanted to give. But you can't love and give unless there's somebody else. You need an other in order to love and to give. But God was everywhere. There was nobody else and nothing else. So God retracted into himself to create space. You have to give another person space, right? And in this space, there was a place for another. The problem was that God was light and the space was dark. God was full and the space was empty. So God sent his light, right? It was like a menorah with, with a place to hold the oil and the wick, and then the flame on the wick. He sends a lamp into this halal, into this space to light it up. The problem is the divine light was too powerful for the lamp that held it, and the thing exploded. When the thing explodes, the various sparks of light became hidden within various shards of this rind, this klipa, this lamp. It's the physical part of the lamp. And so once, and that's in the Lurianic Kabbalah, these are the synonyms for good and evil. The good is the light. The physical pieces of the lamp or the rind, okay, that's evil. And that evil darkness hides the spark of light. You need to recover the spark of light and liberate it from the klipa, from the rind or the shell or the peel. He translates it here. So one of our two Jews, okay, one of our two souls comes from the rind, the shell, the peel. Another word for it is the sitra achra, which is already in earlier Kabbalah. You have the right and the left in the world of the Sfirot and the Zohar. And the left is where certain forces come from whose expression in our world can be evil. Okay, that's the sitra side, okay, the demonic side. So one of our souls, ladies and gentlemen, is evil. Got it? Now, it is this soul, nefesh, which originates in the klipa and sitra achra, in the rind or the other side, that is clothed in the blood of a human being, giving life to the body as it is written. For the soul, the soul of the flesh is in the blood. Okay? What he's trying to say here in much more easy terms is that the physical body, also the desires and needs of the physical body, that is the root and the source of the evil soul. That's where it derives from. That's where it comes from. From this soul stem all the evil characteristics deriving from the four evil elements within it. He's actually going to give examples now of evil character traits that stem from evil elements within the body. Namely, anger and pride emanate from the element of fire, which rises upwards. And the appetite for pleasures come from the element of water, for water promotes the growth of all kinds of pleasure-giving things. If you haven't picked up on it already, what he's doing here is he's talking about the four elements: earth, water, air, and fire. He considers all of these things to be susceptible to giving rise to evil, because all of these four elements are physical. Anything physical has a propensity to give rise to evil traits. Okay, we just had water, okay, promotes the growth of all pleasure-giving things. Frivolity and scoffing, boasting and idle talk from the element of air, like when somebody talks and you say, you're full of hot air, it fits in here. Like air, they lack substance. And sloth, meaning laziness, and melancholy, sadness, emanate from the element of earth. Okay? There's something earthy about being lazy. There's also a connection being suggested here between laziness and sadness. Okay? That sometimes when you're depressed, it leads you to be less active. Okay? And maybe vice versa. Okay, heaviness. Okay, earth is heavy and so is laziness. From this soul that comes from the four elements, this evil soul, this earthy soul, from this soul also stem good traits inherent in every Jew's character, such as compassion and benevolence. In other words, the four elements are not completely evil. They have a propensity to give rise to evil characteristics, but they don't give rise only to evil characteristics. In a Jew, notice what I just said, in a Jew, they can also give rise to good characteristics. For in the case of the Jew, he says it explicitly, this soul of the klipa, of the rind, is derived from the rind called noga, which also, noga has something to do with light, which also contains good. Okay, there's also good in the physical world. Okay, this klipa is from the esoteric tree of knowledge, which has within it, the tree of knowledge relates to the physical world, and it's called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It doesn't contain within it only evil, even if eating from it tends to lead to a world that has more evil. The souls of the nations, okay, we'll stop here for the moment. So far we have Jews, soul number one. Soul number one of the Jew comes from the physical elements of the body, which generally tend to lead to loathsome personal characteristics, but which, for Jews, also have at least the potential to leading to good characteristics. That's what we have so far in sum. Jews, soul number one. Now, let's see about the souls of non-Jews. The souls of the nations of the world, however, emanate from the other, unclean klipot, which contain no good whatsoever. There's all kinds of klipot because this lamp shattered into perhaps infinite numbers of pieces, okay? Some of them have the potential for good within them, and most of them apparently don't. In other words, some shards may hide a spark, but other shards are just shards. There's no hidden treasure to be found. Those are the shards from which emanate the souls of non-Jews. As it is written in Eitz Chaim, that all the good that the nations do is out of selfish motives. It's really neat in Aramaic. Kol tivu davdin haumot, all the good that the nations do, legarmai hu avdin, they do it for their own selves. They only do it out of selfish motives. Even when good seems to be done by non-Jewish nations, it only looks that way. But really at its core, it's selfish, the claim is here. So the Gemara comments on the verse, the kindness of the nations is sin, that all the charity and kindness done by the nations of the world is only for their self-glorification. Look how charitable we are. Look how much social justice there is in our society. All of these things just to self-aggrandize, just to boast, just to show how better they are than everybody else. If you get the feeling that this is not judging non-Jews, in Hebrew, the chaf, lifnim mishurat, not lifnim mishurat adin. Ladun l'chaf zchut is the phrase I'm looking for. If you're not giving them the benefit of the doubt, it really looks like, yeah, they're not being given the benefit of the doubt. So far we have the physical soul of Jews, which has at least the potential for good, and the physical soul of non-Jews, which has absolutely no potential for good. Now we get to the second Jewish soul. Jewish soul number 2. The second uniquely Jewish soul is truly a part of God above. That's an important phrase in Kabbalah and Hasidism. Chelek Eloah mima'al mamash. Truly a part of God above. Okay? As it is written concerning Adam, who was like his soul is everybody's soul. And he, God, blew into his, Adam's nostrils, a soul of life. Okay, and you, God, blew the soul into me. That's from the Jewish prayers. The significance of the verb blow, right, is now explained. It is written in the Zohar, he who blows, that's God, blows the soul into a person, blows from within him. That is to say, from his inwardness and his innermost being. Meaning that when God blows the breath of life into Adam, a part of God is going into Adam. For it is of his inward and innermost vitality that a man emits through blowing with force. Even when a person blows out, you're getting something that's truly from within yourself. It tires you out, he says here. So too, allegorically speaking, have Jewish souls risen in the divine thought. They have risen in the divine thought, as it is written, Israel is my firstborn son, and you are children unto God your Lord. That is to say, that just as a child is derived from its father's brain, so too is the soul of every Jew derived from God's thought and wisdom. I'll explain this. The great physician of antiquity, Galen, thought that semen derives in the brain, then it travels down the spinal cord, and ultimately comes out through the sexual organ. Okay? I don't know if the guy who edited this Tanya knew that, okay? But this idea comes into the thought of the Middle Ages from Galen. Okay? So to speak, what do you have here? That Israel is God's child, so to speak, God's very essence from the brain. I neglected to say that when the semen comes from the brain, it collects a little bit from every part of the body on its way out. Okay, meaning that the semen is a kind of microcosm of the man. Or it's a micro man. Okay, not a microcosm, it's a micro man. And so if Israel is God's firstborn son, created, then metaphorically, the essence of God exists within Israel. Okay,
What about the essence of the woman?
That for Galen is similar, meaning the egg, okay, also contains in microscopic form, in essence. Galen had no concept of DNA, but in a certain sense, it's true, we know, okay, that there is sort of a coded representation of the full person, both in the semen and in the egg. Okay, so where were we? Okay, but it comes out of the head, meaning so too is the soul of every Jew derived from God's thought and wisdom. Okay? For he is wise, but not with a wisdom that is known to us, because he and his wisdom are one, as Maimonides writes. He is knowledge and simultaneously the knower, famous Maimonidean idea. God both is wisdom and is that which is known, and that is coming now into the essence of continues, this is not within the power of any man to comprehend clearly. As it is written, can you find God by searching? And as it is written, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. Okay, and then there's another note. We'll finish the note. Okay. Now. True, he says, there are myriads of different gradations of souls, nishamot, rank upon rank, to infinity, meaning there are infinite perhaps shards and infinite shards with sparks. For example, the souls of the patriarchs of Moses, our teacher, are by far. How did we get into chapter 2 already? I must have skipped something. Wait. I'm sorry.
You didn't skip it, went right into it.
Went right into it without even noticing? How did I do that? I apologize. Okay. Well, what he's going to do as he continues is he's going to talk about he's going to identify the sfirot from which derive this essence that is found in every Jew, this second soul. And he's going to say, we're going to leave it here, he's going to say that it derives from the three highest sfirot, which in the Habad scheme are Chokhmah, Binah, Vadat. Okay, which are all synonyms for wisdom or understanding of some sort. These in Chabad thought, and maybe in other Kabbalah even, are to some degree they are the intellectual sfirot, perhaps as opposed to the emotional sfirot. And that, from the very intellectual top, okay, is where the special Jewish soul comes from. Okay, this may fit in, by the way, with the intellectual nature of Chabad. It may be an arguing point against the Misnagdim, right, who say that it is the mind and it is Talmudic scholarship that God most desires. Okay, so here you have a Hasidic text which is emphasizing that side of it, and even a Hasidic movement which is taking for its very name, okay, these words, Chokhmah, Binah, Vadat. I hope nobody will be insulted if I tell you the joke they told me in high school. I went to a high school that, let's just say that the yeshiva was a yeshiva that wasn't very fond of Chabad, okay? These are descendants of the spiritual descendants of the Misnagdim. Plus, they were trying to carve out a place for themselves in the Jewish community that Chabad was very strong in. Okay, that also never makes for a very good relationship. And the yeshiva I went to, they had jokes about Chabad. One of the jokes was, there's a different way to explain what Chabad stands for. Chamor bli dat. For those who don't know Hebrew, an ignorant donkey. It's from the same initials. That's what people who didn't like Chabad apparently would say. But you can make fun of anything, okay? And there is a lot of very unique and special and beautiful stuff in Chabad. And, the truth is that when somebody is the butt of jokes, okay, quite often it's because there's people either who are jealous of success or who are envious or not pleased with the success, and this amount of success, and probably for a lot of very, very good reasons. Now, given all that I said, that there's a lot to admire in Chabad, it's possible, by the way, that I personally wouldn't be here today together with you at this class if not for Chabad. It's possible that some of you also, the Chabad was critical at some point in your life or your development. And yet, to be honest, and even having even saying all of this, there are very difficult things within Chabad. And I mean, many of you understand that in terms of today's Chabad, okay? All the messianic business and the worship of the Rebbe and all kinds of things like that, okay? And there's other things too, not just that, right? But I'm not talking about that now. I'm not being contemporary now, okay? I'm talking about 7 or more generations ago, okay? In the beginning of Chabad thought, in this book that we're reading from the Alter Rebbe of Chabad. When I opened that Tanya in 9th or 10th grade at a Chabad house in Boston, it really blew my mind, okay? What is he saying here, okay? Earlier, I briefly mentioned in response to Marion, DNA. Nowadays, we talk about genetics as a biological thing that can be coded and measured. Okay, you can read DNA. You can read genetics today. Here, he's talking about a sort of spiritual genetics. Okay, not how things derive from a physical body, but how they derive from a spiritual body. The 10 sfirot are in the form of a body. We've talked about that also in the past, okay? And this body, which may not be physical, but it gives birth or gives rise to something in the spiritual world, which is the second special soul of a Jew, okay? This is a soul that non-Jews are not privy to. Jews are privy to a soul that comes down from the very highest sfirot, and apparently from what he says here, non-Jews are not privy to that soul at all. Jews have 2 souls, and non-Jews only have 1 soul, which is a physical soul, which comes out of the 4 elements that are found in the world and in the human body. Okay? Non-Jews, in other words, they inhabit the physical world, but they don't inhabit the spiritual world. Only Jews inhabit the spiritual world. And if we go back another step backwards, even the physical soul, which both Jews and non-Jews have, we saw that he says that it's not the same one. There's shards that have sparks, and there's shards that don't have sparks. The physical soul of the Jew comes from a shard with a spark, and therefore it can potentially give rise to good character traits. Whereas the shard without the sparks cannot give rise to good character traits, and even character traits that look good in a non-Jew, according to this, are not really good. You know, he's just fooling you.
Does this eliminate the possibility of converts?
Woo! Okay. That goes all the way back to Judah Halevi. Okay? Where did Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi get this idea? Well, if we look at the chapter and a half that we read, we saw quotations from the Bible, the written Torah. We saw quotations from the Talmud and Midrash, the oral Torah, the open one. We saw quotations from Eitz Chaim, from the Lurianic Kabbalah, from the secret oral Torah. You know, if there's 3 Torahs, then he has all of them here. So which of those Torahs did he inherit this idea from, that somehow the souls of Jews and the souls of non-Jews are essentially different? Where the heck did he get it from? And the answer is, with all due respect to the Zohar and Lurianic Kabbalah, okay, that the traditional Torah, meaning the Torah that Jews knew until the Middle Ages, meaning the Bible and the works of the rabbis, okay, does not contain this idea. Okay? I want to make this a little bit more shocking for you. So what I'm going to say is that sometimes the person who tries to be the most traditional of all is actually anti-traditional. Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi here is being anti-traditional. He's rebelling. He's not rebelling, but he's bringing something which is foreign to the tradition. The reason this is so radical is because the people who are usually accused of doing this are the rationalists, like Maimonides. Okay? That was the criticism. Maimonides, you are taking foreign Greek ideas and bringing them into the Torah. You're contaminating the Torah with foreign ideas. Your worldview is anti-traditional. It doesn't derive from the written Torah and the oral Torah. Rather, it derives from Greece. And yet, even the people who looked a heck of a lot more traditional and sounded a heck of a lot more traditional than Maimonides, even the very people who accused Maimonides of being anti-traditional, those very people brought an idea into the Jewish discussion which has no basis in the tradition. Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi did not make this up himself. Okay? He was not the first person to begin to think along these lines. The first person who says or writes anything like this explicitly was many centuries before Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and that was the person whom we began discourse with, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, in the Kuzari. Okay? In the Kuzari, he does not go as far as Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. He's not quite as extreme as Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, but the roots of the idea are his. And I'm going to maybe blow your minds by saying this. The roots of the idea, believe it or not, are in an attempt to be Aristotelian. How so? How so? Aristotle was not Jewish. Aristotle was Greek. Okay? Aristotle never talks about Jewish and non-Jewish souls. In fact, Aristotle never even talks about Jews at all. There's a book that was written in the Middle Ages that says that Aristotle met Jews at the end of his life, and he said, wow, when he converted. But that book isn't real. Okay? Aristotle never met a Jew in his life. Okay? Now, Aristotle, in principle, thought that all human beings carry the same potential. Okay? To be human is to have the capacity to learn, or perhaps more correct, the desire and the capacity to learn. That's what makes you human, according to Aristotle. And it doesn't matter whether you're Greek or Roman or Persian, okay? In every society you'll find people who both have the potential and the desire to learn. In other words, you'll have human beings in every society. At the same time, Aristotle was by no means a modern egalitarian, okay? He did think that there are people who, they just don't have it. You ain't got it, okay? And he wasn't afraid to castigate certain peoples or certain nations or certain races as lacking the potential to be fully human, okay? But still, in principle, every human society in principle is basically the same. What did rock, animate, plant like a tree, animal like a horse, or human right? With the potential and desire to learn. There are essential differences between a person and a horse, between a horse and a tree, and between a tree and a rock. Okay, this hierarchy does exist, and it's not just a hierarchy, it's a hierarchy of virtue. Okay, there is something special in a plant which is not in a rock, and so on and so forth. Okay, Judah Halevi in the Middle Ages was looking for a model to explain why God chose the Jews. Okay, there's the old rhyme about why did God choose the Jews. Kind of funny that he did it. Maybe somebody remembers it by heart. Okay, but this is not something that is just modern. Okay, in the Middle Ages, it was a very big question. Why did God choose the Jews? Why did God choose Israel? It was part of the Jewish-Christian debate. Okay, the Christians said, you know, God blew it when he chose you. You proved yourselves not worthy. And that's why he left you and he went to us. Okay? But Judah Halevi, he wasn't looking for a why did God choose the Jews specifically because of the Christian challenge. He was mostly looking for it because of the philosophical challenge. Okay? In the Middle Ages, Jews faced two kinds of challenges. They were minorities in the Christian world. They were minorities in the Muslim world, and that was the same challenge. Okay, living as helpless minorities in a culture that denigrated you. It's not easy to continue that way. Okay, that was a challenge. But that was a challenge that was mostly a challenge of the sword, meaning power, okay? Other people have power over you, and that's a challenge. It's not easy. But it's not necessarily an intellectual challenge, okay? Sometimes the greatest challenge is not from the person with big muscles and big fists. Sometimes the challenge is from somebody who really has an idea that can potentially undermine your ideas or your worldview. Especially in Christian Europe, that was the case. Jews looked at their neighbors often in the Christian world and saw them as barbarians. There was a challenge. Those barbarians, they ruled you, okay? But the Jews, to a large degree in Christian Europe, felt no intellectual challenge. The opposite, the contrary. They saw themselves as the intellectual superiors of the Christians. What do we have to learn from them? They're just brutes. Okay? But that was not true. That was not true of philosophy in the Middle Ages, which was strongest in the Muslim world. Okay? And here was the challenge. Here was the challenge. Philosophy can show you all kinds of things which undermine the Torah. Philosophy can show you that God didn't create the world. Philosophy can show you that God doesn't know or care about the lives of human beings. Philosophy can show you that God doesn't care whether you keep the commandments of the Torah or don't keep the commandments of the Torah. Philosophy can show you that God doesn't care whether you continue being Jewish despite all the hardship or become something else. Okay? Philosophy was a very great challenge. It challenged people like Maimonides. And in fact, it turned a lot of people, perhaps including Maimonides, into Aristotelian Jews. And that is what drove Judah Halevi nuts. Judah Halevi wanted to say that as convincing and as powerful and as, philosophy is like, wow, as much as you have that wow, there's an even greater wow. There's something even grander, something even more convincing, something that just outshines philosophy. And that is the Torah of the Jews. That's what he tries to do in his book, the Kusari. And that is the reason why he was so concerned with the question, why did God choose the Jews? Okay? He's trying to tell you that just by being Jewish, you have something that the philosophers lack. And he looked, he searched for the means to try to put his finger on what is special about the Jews. What makes the Jews special? And when he was looking for an answer to the question, what makes the Jews special? Even more special than the philosophers. And this Torah of the Jews is more special than the philosophy of the philosophers. When he was looking for his answer to this question, he davka found it in Aristotle. He tried to out-Aristotle Aristotle. How did he do that? He said, look, he said, we all know that in the world we have inanimate, plant, animals, and humans. We have rocks, trees, horses, and people. You know what he says? That's what the philosophers think, because the philosophers don't know everything. Their arguments cannot clarify all of reality, because there are aspects of reality which are beyond rational philosophy. You know what there is in the world, said Judah Halevi? There are rocks and plants and horses and people and Jews. There's a fifth level. There's the fifth element. That was once a movie, I think, or something. Okay? You have a fifth level in the world, and that is the Jews. Now, he did not explicitly say that the soul of a Jew is different than the soul of a non-Jew. In fact, he hinted that the souls of most Jews are exactly the same as the souls of non-Jews in practice. But he said, there is something collectively in the Jewish people which allows certain Jews to achieve something that non-Jews cannot achieve. In other words, certain Jews have a potential which is not shared by non-Jews, and that potential apparently, he never completely clarifies it, but that potential apparently is the potential for prophecy. Meaning, a rock can follow the laws of physics. A tree can live according to biology. A horse can live according to psychology. Psychology is an animal science for Aristotle. A person can do philosophy, and it's wonderful to do it, but only the Jews have the potential for prophecy, which reveals a level of reality that philosophy cannot touch. Okay? How did this whole discussion begin? When somebody asked, and forgive me, I forgot who asked it. Somebody asked, what about conversion?
It was Jennifer.
It was Jennifer. Okay. Conversion is the test case for this. Okay? What is conversion in the sources of the tradition, in the Bible and in rabbinic thought especially? Well, you want to join the Jewish people. You were part of one people. Now you want to be part of another people. But you're human regardless. There's no source for this idea. Jews are sort of, I don't know, the Jews are privy to a realm, okay? The non-Jews are not privy to. You don't find this, okay? The crux of the matter is conversion. To convert in a traditional sense simply means to join the Jewish people and to take upon yourself the obligations of the Jewish people. No more and no less. But, and that creates no problem until Judah Halevi. All of a sudden, for Judah Halevi, it created a problem. Because if Jews somehow spiritually inherit the potential for prophecy, Most Jews don't realize it, but they still carry it. It's spiritually genetic, okay? If that's the case, then someone who converts will be blessed. Someone who converts, it's wonderful. But says the scholar to the Khazar king in the book, the Kuzari, he tells them, you can convert and you'll share in our blessings, but you will never be completely like one of us. That is the first time in Jewish history, okay, that such a thing was said. Yeah.
Yeah, what about Ruth and all her descendants?
What about them?
Because she was not Jewish,
Right.
but her descendants were. She was a convert, the first
The
convert.
question is not about her descendants. The question is about Ruth herself, right? In rabbinic thought, and it's even in the verse, right? She was a Moabitess, and now she's a Jewess. That's all. Or an Israelite. Okay, that's all. She left one people, she joined another people, but there's no change in her humanity. This never is to anybody, at least not Judah Halevi. To claim that there's something spiritually hereditary, okay, among the Jews that other nations are not privy to. Okay,
But
Judah
still, this convert gives birth to children,
yeah,
and they're considered to be totally within the tribe now, even though they're
that
children of a convert.
that does have to do with a certain rabbinic discussion, okay, about
Okay,
about the status of converts. And yet, we're not talking about the halachic status of converts now. We're talking about the humanity of Jews, non-Jews, and converts. Judah Halevi says that the humanity of non-Jews is somehow different in potential than the humanity of Jews. Converts, therefore, their halachic status may change, but their essence cannot change because it's
But they
hereditary.
contribute their essence to their children.
All right, so this is already looking for solutions. What do we do with Judah Halevi? So one solution is to say, okay, he only meant it for the convert himself or herself, but then the next generation, right, is already born Jewish. That's one way, perhaps, to answer the question. Does it really answer the question? I don't know, right? Who did the convert marry, for instance? Okay, does it really work? I'm not absolutely sure or not sure, okay? Another way to deal with it, which is the primary way to deal with it in succeeding generations to this day, is to say that when somebody converts, indeed, they now that's an idea, but it's used in a way that solves the Judah Halevi problem. Okay? That the convert really was Jewish all the time. Okay? That's another way, perhaps, to try to deal with this issue. Okay? But instead of dealing with the issue, let's look at the issue itself. Let's not try to figure it out or answer it, but to understand what happened. Judah Halevi wanted to say that there's a realm of existence beyond philosophy. So he took Aristotle's 5 levels and made a 5th level, okay? In doing this, was he being racist? There's an article that was published in, I think, the Harvard Theological Journal. Was Judah Halevi a racist? I mentioned it, I think, when we did Judah Halevi. Well, that's taken and trying to throw it back, okay, on somebody in the Middle Ages. But it's more likely that he was trying to say that there is a realm of reality which cannot be touched by philosophy, okay? And in fact, when he talks to the Khazar king in the Kuzari book, right, there's two ways of reading it. If you read it that, the Jewish scholar is Judah Halevi, and he's representing Judaism, and the Khazar king is just trying to learn, then you'll get to the conclusion that I told you already. But you can also read the Kuzari differently, and I think I mentioned this too, right? You can say that Judah Halevi was actually being a bit more subtle, and that sometimes the Khazar king expresses truths that the Jewish scholar did not realize on his own, okay? And that perhaps not everything the Jewish scholar, okay? And that would be a way to totally get Judah Halevi off the hook for an accusation of racism. The only problem is that we're not doing Judah Halevi tonight. We're doing Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. And even if we can get Judah Halevi off the hook, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi is still hanging there, okay? Because Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi puts it in absolute terms that cannot be misunderstood and that cannot be so easily interpreted away. Here you don't have two characters, the king and the Jew, who are debating each other and maybe there's some truth on both sides. Yeah, you don't have that here. He is presenting, he's arguing here an interpretation of the sources, okay, that the sources themselves say, in his opinion, although nobody ever stated this, okay, which is essentially different than that of non-Jews, and the Jews have an added second spiritual soul that non-Jews are not privy to at all, okay? Now, Chabad, I've always heard, I've never investigated the issue, but I'm sure somebody has, okay? And so if somebody knows, you can even tell me. Chabad's policy around the world is not to do conversions, okay? It's not that they're against conversions, okay? What they normally do in Jewish communities where there exists something besides Chabad, which may be fewer and fewer around the world as time goes on, but in Jewish communities where there's something besides Chabad, the Chabad rabbi will, if he sees what to his mind is a serious convert, he may refer the convert to the. But in many Chabad communities, the Chabad rabbi doesn't touch conversions. I've heard that in some communities more recently, the Rebbe has been absent for a long time, for whatever reason. All right, and I've heard that there are Chabad communities where they're perhaps more doing this now, but the traditional Chabad stance was not to do conversions, to refer it to a non-Chabad Beit Din, okay? It can occur to you, and it occurs to me, that perhaps, and I don't know the answer, that perhaps the reluctance to be involved in conversion has something to do with what we read here tonight. It doesn't have to. It may be completely for other reasons whatsoever, okay? But perhaps it might have something in any case, in 9th or 10th grade, I was totally annoyed by this. I couldn't believe that somebody would write that, the first Rebbe of Chabad would write that non-Jewish souls are completely different than Jewish souls. It bugged me a lot, I have to admit it, okay? And it bugged me for many, many years, and it still bugs me. Comments, questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Seems to me, I became familiar with someone who was actually a convert for Chabad many years ago.
Okay, yeah.
I always felt that they were very much into conversion, that they were trying to build the flock, to reach out. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm just speaking from anecdotal.
I'm going to be very sarcastic now. Excuse me. Okay, but I'm going to be very cynical now. Chabad is totally into conversion. They're into the conversion of Jews to the religion closest to Judaism, which is Chabad. That was the cynicism of Rav Shach. He used to say that. I think I told you that once. No, I don't believe. I should clarify that in case I don't know if this video is on YouTube and somebody hears me say that. Maybe I was a little bit too negative. I think I was a little bit too negative tonight because I really
Can I get
do.
something?
Well, I just want to say I really do have a lot of love for Chabad, but Chabad Chabad traditionally was very much into getting Jews to become closer to Chabad, but less so to the conversion of non-Jews. There may have been exceptions done, okay, but that's what I both heard and saw in certain communities. I'm sorry, someone else has something to say.
Yeah, is to if there is ever a non-Jew applying for conversion, to persuade that non-Jew that he should accept the 7 mitzvot of Bnei Noach, and they claim that they already convinced more than 1.5 million Gentiles to retain the status of Noachide, in other words, not part of the Jewish people, but those who accept the special mitzvot of the sons of Noach. In other words, that's the way they try to tackle the challenge of conversion.
Thank you from the depths of my heart. I sinned tonight by being too negative in a place where it wasn't called for. I apologize, if I went a little bit too overboard tonight. But that is something that is a beautiful begun by the Rebbe in his lifetime. The campaign for the 7 sons of the law. I'm losing it. The 7 laws of the sons of Noah, meaning the 7 laws for all humanity. That's a rabbinic idea that's been around for thousands of years. But the Rebbe of Habad is the first one who actually tried to turn this into a public universal movement. And Chabadniks all around the world try to spread this idea of the 7 laws of the sons of Noah. It's the first time in Jewish history that it's been actively propagated like that. And in my opinion, it's a wonderful thing. Well, what could be wrong with it? Chabad, by the way, if I remember correctly, got the U.S. Congress to ratify a seven laws of the sons of Noah. You can find out exactly what it is. And it's the kind of thing that it's not only hard to find fault with, it's very, very nice. It would be wonderful if all the nations of the world would follow those 7 laws. So thank you for adding that. Okay. Any other questions or comments about this? And did anybody get a stomachache or a heart attack from this?
No,
Okay.
only that. That's why you see the Chabad always has the mitzvah mobiles and the inviting people to lay tefillin and so forth. They try to bring Jews back.
Not people, only men.
This
Woman
is
shows
true.
up at the table.
They
They
give Shabbos candles.
Yes.
You may have mentioned it, but I think it's important to remember and put in jail by the Tsarist police. And the reason, and of course they still celebrate every year the day that he was released from jail, but they don't tell you that he was put in jail not because of Gentiles, but because other Jews went to the police to tell bad things about him, and it took some time for the Tsarist Gentile police to understand that they should not mingle with Jewish politics or so on.
That's very correct. And there's a famous story about that too. The Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, when Napoleon was invading Russia, so many Jews were rooting for Napoleon because the Tsar was very cruel and terrible to the Jews, while Napoleon gave equal rights to the Jews. He emancipated the Jews. And Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi supported the Tsar. Supported the Tsar. And the question is why? And his answer was that if Napoleon conquers Russia, Jews won't remain Jewish. Right? It's better for the Jews, being Jews, to be under the rule of the Tsar.
So it's better for Jews to be persecuted so that they'll stay Jewish. Great.
Okay. I guess it depends what your ultimate value is. Is your value Jewish prosperity, or is your value Jewish spirituality? And I think if you compare, say, in the late 19th and 20th century, the spirituality of the Jews of France, let's say the 19th century, the spirituality of the Jews of France in an emancipated France, in Europe, long way.
I would have to say I'd be in favor of Jews who are alive. That's what I'd be in favor of, living Jews, however they live.
I think Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi was also in favor of living Jews.
I'm not so sure if he really is looking for the persecution that led to the pogroms. Not so sure.
But I think we've seen repeatedly in history that in countries where we were given equal rights, from the Enlightenment to prosperity in the United States to the Western world in general, the more we are equal, the more we also tend to assimilate. So it's not an unfounded fear.
It's a fear, but it's also I prefer to see Jews by choice.
Oh, I agree. It's not a great thing, and I'm not advocating persecution for us I'm just saying. But prosperity does often lead to assimilation.
Right, and it concerns me that that a movement or a leader of a movement would literally choose oppression over freedom of choice. And I understand why. But I'm just saying it's disturbing.
I'm not so sure he was supporting oppression as he was survival as Jews. Because what does it mean to have Jews who aren't Jews anymore? Just live bodies, but they aren't really Jewish anymore? I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, no, I get it. I understand it. I totally would not in favor of his choice. That's all I'm saying. No, if people are going to assimilate, people are going to assimilate. But to have another oppressive force be the determining factor of our being Jewish, that's I'm sorry. I'm back. But that is not, to me, that's not a spiritual stance, frankly, because life is more important.
Or it's a spiritual stance which some of us may have a very hard time with.
I have a very hard time
go ahead.
And I get it.
I just wanted to say that there's a book that I read years ago, Missionaries, Mandarins, and Jews, about the Jewish community that existed in China.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Where there was no essential anti-Semitism. And after a time when there really weren't enough that they would intermarry if need be with the Muslim population in China, not the Christians, because the Muslims were much more similar in their religious practices rather than the Christians or the pagan religions that were part of China, which had I guess, quite a variety of religions. But eventually, the Chinese Jewish community totally faded out. And it seems to be something about Jews that they need to be harassed every now and then to remember who they are and what the traditions have to offer. And it's a horrible thought, but it's.
And unfortunately, that's on us, not on external forces.
Let's
We
hold
are the ones who behave that way.
let's hold it here for a moment, if we can.
Enlist external forces to do that. That's horrifying to me. I'm just being, I get it, but
I
it's horrifying.
think the positions are very clear. I think something very interesting that nobody's remarked on, okay? That the very movement which in its beginning saw spiritual survival under oppression as preferable to an open society, that very movement, better than any other Jewish movement in the world, has best adapted to an open society and keeping Jews Jewish in an open society. And I don't know if that's a paradox.
Good point.
Or if that is something that I guess results from the initial part. Okay, I'll end by saying I'd like to end with something positive, and that is that I am a Habadnik. Maybe not in the usual sense, okay, but a Habadnik in a different sense. God is somewhat of a model and a teacher, and someone whose leadership I respect. Is Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, the currently the Rav of Efrat, and I won't go into his whole story, just his story with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Okay, he was once involved in a dilemma, and I'm even going to put the dilemma aside, even though it's a really fun story. He didn't know what to do. He was being told in two different directions by people that he respected to do the two opposite things, and he was having a hard time making a decision. And I'll even tell you what the decision was briefly. He was asked to be the rabbi of a conservative synagogue without a mechitza, without a divider. He himself was an Orthodox rabbi, and they invited him to be the rabbi of their synagogue, and he didn't know whether or not So he went to consult with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And what do you think the Lubavitcher Rebbe told him?
Take it.
Take it.
Or not, without a divider between man and woman, or not?
To take it.
The Lubavitcher Rebbe told him to take the synagogue. Okay? And how did he explain it? Why do it?
Because we could always change it back.
He explained it as follows. Listen, this is really good. He said that there are two kinds of soldiers in an army. Okay? You have the soldiers who wear uniforms. Those are the regular soldiers. You also have the soldiers, he said, who don't wear uniforms. They have to go undercover and dress like the enemy and mingle with the enemy and be over enemy lines. Sometimes their fellow soldiers or their compatriots of being traitors, because that was his worry. He said, if I take a synagogue without a mechitza, then my fellow Orthodox rabbis will say that, you crossed the line, right? You joined the other camp. Okay, so the Lubavitcher Rebbe told him, take it. And he said that what I need is soldiers who don't wear uniforms. Okay, in other words, I need Chabadniks who don't wear uniforms. And that answered a question that I always had. The seventh Rebbe of Lubavitch, who seems to be the final Rebbe of Lubavitch, somebody who was brilliant. He was a brilliant leader, and he did extraordinary things. And it always bothered me whenever I would come into contact with Chabad throughout my life. I was always ambivalent. that on the one hand, there were so many beautiful things. And on the other hand, there were things which could simply drive you nuts. Okay? That if you didn't conform to the way of Chabad thinking, on almost every single issue, right? In other words, what they were really looking for is soldiers. They were looking for conformists. They were looking for people who would wear the uniform and dance the dance. And it bothered me that the Rebbe didn't realize this, right? The Rebbe didn't realize that setting up an army with Chabad uniforms on the one hand could do a lot of things, but on the other hand, that as much as it turned on a lot of people, there were also people who would be turned off by it. And after I heard Shlomo Rishkin's story, I realized that the Rebbe did understand that. Okay, that the Rebbe realized there was a limit to what the overt Chabad movement could do, and that there also needed to be uniforms. The way I personally understand Chabadic without a uniform, and I think it's also the way Shlomo Riskin understands it, is Chabad without a uniform is that, like Chabad, you try not to give up ever on any Jew, okay? But beyond that, it's not the Chabad way. It's certainly no uniform. It's not Chabad customs, okay? And it may be a more eye-to-eye thing. It may not be, giving Judaism over to those who weren't privileged to grow up with it, right? I have it and you don't. But it also may be a matter of what they call in Hebrew, begova ha'einayim. I don't know how to say that in English, where you meet the person and you have baggage, you have treasures, you have things to represent. Maybe that's what the Rebbe meant by Chabadniks without uniforms.
By the way,
Yeah.
Sharon and I were lucky enough to go on a cruise where Shlomo Riskin was the scholar in residence.
Yofi.
It was excellent.
You had a good time?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. That's, by the way, a great story by Shlomo Riskin. He tells it in two places, two videos on the internet. If you want, I'll send you links. The story is 1,000,000 times more fun than what I told you. Okay? Well, I'll try to remember to put up the link.
Like to see that. Yeah.
Okay. But in that sense, he considers himself a Chabadnik. Okay. Very good. So opening up, and I don't know. Have until next week. Shabbat Shalom.